I hadn't planned on falling in love that night. I'd planned on eggnog, bad Christmas sweaters, and pretending I wasn't dreading another year of watching everyone else's family feel more like a family than mine did. I definitely hadn't planned on him. The snow was coming down sideways past the window of Priya's parents' living room, the kind of snow that makes everything outside look like a memory before it's even happened. Inside, the tree lights blinked red and gold across the ceiling, and somewhere in the kitchen someone had put on that one Mariah Carey song for the third time. I was curled into the corner of the couch with a mug of something too sweet, half listening to Priya's aunt argue about stuffing recipes, when the front door opened and let in a gust of cold air and him. Sorry, the roads are insane," he said, stomping snow off his boots, cheeks red, dark hair damp at the edges. Traffic on 95 was a parking lot. Priya shrieked and launched herself at him. "You made it, everyone. This is my brother, Theo. Theo, this is everyone." I'd heard about Theo for 3 years, Theo who was finishing his residency 2 states away. Theo who sent Priya ridiculous voice memos instead of texting. Theo who, according to Priya, would probably die alone in a hospital cafeteria because he works too much to ever date anyone. I had a whole personality built for him in my head before I ever met him, some tired, humorless workaholic in scrubs. The man peeling off a snow-soaked coat in the doorway did not match the file. He caught me looking and grinned, a little crooked, like he knew something funny was about to happen and hadn't decided if he'd let it. "You must be the famous Nora," he said. "Priya's told me you make her cry laughing at least once a week." "Only when she deserves it," I said, and he laughed, a real one, surprised out of him, and something in my chest did a small, stupid flip that I immediately decided to ignore. I want to be honest about something here, because this isn't the kind of story where I can pretend I saw it coming and prepared myself. I didn't see it coming. I was 26 years old, freshly out of a relationship that had ended with a whimper instead of a bang 6 months earlier, and I had exactly zero interest in feeling anything for anyone, let alone my best friend's brother, on Christmas Eve in her parents' house, surrounded by her entire extended family. But there's a version of falling that doesn't ask permission. It just happens in the spaces between things, while you're passing the mashed potatoes, while you're both reaching for the same ornament on the half-decorated tree. While he's telling a story about a patient who tried to convince him she was allergic to Tuesdays. "She was very serious about it," Theo said later. When we ended up assigned to the same task, untangling 3 strands of ancient lights that Priya's mom swore had worked just last year, we were on the floor by the tree. A small mountain of green wire between us, and everyone else had drifted off to argue about a card game in the other room. "Tuesdays specifically," I said. "Tuesdays specifically." I told her I couldn't write that on a chart, and she looked personally betrayed. He held up a strand, squinting at a dead bulb. "You're smiling, I'm funny. You're something," I said, and meant it in a way I didn't examine too closely. We worked in comfortable quiet for a while, our fingers occasionally brushing over the same knot of wire. And I noticed things I had no business noticing, the way he rolled his sleeves like he was used to needing his hands free, the small white scar through one eyebrow. How he listened like the conversation actually mattered to him instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. "Priya said you're a nurse," I said, mostly to have something to say that wasn't "Why are you looking at me like that?" ER doc, almost done with residency. 2 more months of being everyone's punching bag and then I'm an actual attending. He said it lightly, but there was something tired underneath it. The kind of tired that lives in your bones after years of it. "She talk about me a lot, constantly. You're kind of a legend in her stories. Good legend, or my brother's a workaholic disaster legend. Bit of both," I admitted, and he laughed again, and I thought, this is a problem. By the time we'd untangled all 3 strands, one of which, it turned out, was simply broken beyond saving, something had shifted between us that neither of us said out loud. It was in the way he sat a little closer than the tangled lights required, in the way I kept finding reasons to stay in the room instead of rejoining the card game. Priya called it getting cozy over Christmas lights when she wandered back in and caught us laughing at nothing. And I felt my face go hot and busied myself with an ornament that did not need adjusting. "You two are being weird," she said, delighted, pointing between us. "Weirdly cute, I don't like it." "We're hanging lights, Theo said, entirely too innocent. Mom, she gave me a look over his shoulder, a look that said we are discussing this later, before she got dragged back to the card game by her cousin. I should tell you here that Priya and I have been best friends since college, the kind of friendship built on shared apartments and 2 a.m. grocery runs and knowing exactly what the other person needs before they ask for it. She had exactly one rule in our entire friendship, stated more than once, usually half joking but not entirely: don't fall for my brother. I'd always laughed it off because it had never once been a real possibility. Theo had been a photo on her phone, a voice on speaker during long car rides, an idea of a person. He was not an idea anymore. He was sitting cross-legged on his parents' living room floor, cheeks still faintly pink from the cold, telling me about the time he'd accidentally called a supervising attending mom during a 20-hour shift, and I was laughing so hard I had to put my mug down before I spilled it. It's not that funny, he protested, grinning. It's extremely funny. What did she say? She said, I love you too, now go put in the central line. He shook his head, still smiling at the memory. She still brings it up. I'll be 60 and she'll still bring it up. I would too, I don't doubt it. There was a pause then, one of those pauses that has weight to it. That means more than the silence should, and he looked at me in a way that made the room feel smaller, warmer, like the space between us had its own gravity. Can I ask you something? He said. Depends what it is. Fair, a small, careful smile. Are you seeing anyone? The question hung there, honest and a little nervous, and I felt my heart do something complicated. No, I said. Not for a while now. Good, he said, and then like he'd startled himself. I mean, not good that you're, I just meant, I know what you meant, I said, and I was smiling so hard my face hurt. We were interrupted then, of course we were. That's how these nights go, by Priya's mother announcing that dinner was ready. And the moment scattered into the noise of chairs and dishes, and someone's toddler cousin crying about not wanting sweet potatoes. But something had been said, or almost said, and it sat warm in my chest through the entire meal, through the toasts and the too long grace and the second helping of everything. I caught Theo looking at me twice during dinner. Both times he looked away first, like he'd been caught doing something he wasn't supposed to, and both times I felt that same stupid flip in my chest. After dinner, most of the family settled in for a movie, some black and white classic that played every year, apparently, a tradition older than most of the people in the room. I slipped out to the back porch for air, needing a minute away from the noise and the heat and the growing. Terrifying awareness of exactly how much I wanted to know what it would feel like if Theo kissed me. The porch was cold and quiet, snow still falling steady and silent over the yard, the porch light casting everything in soft gold. I wrapped my arms around myself and watched my breath fog in front of me, trying to talk myself down from feelings I had no right to be having. I didn't hear the door open behind me until his voice did. Room for one more out here. I turned and there he was, framed in the doorway with the warm light of the house behind him, a blanket in his hands that he held out to me without a word. I took it and our fingers brushed again, and this time neither of us pulled away too fast. You looked cold from the window, he said, coming to stand beside me at the railing. I am cold. Also hiding from your Uncle Dave's opinions on the stock market. Smart woman, he leaned on the railing, close enough that his shoulder nearly touched mine. Can I tell you something? And you have to promise not to make it weird. I make everything weird, it's kind of my thing. I know, he said, softer now, and it didn't sound like a complaint. I've heard about you for 3 years, Nora this, Nora that. Nora got us kicked out of a trivia night. Nora cried during a dog food commercial. A pause. I thought Priya was exaggerating. Building you up into something that couldn't possibly be real. And, he looked at me then, really looked, snow catching in his dark hair, his breath visible in the cold air between us. And she undersold it, he said quietly. I've been trying to figure out how to say that all night without it sounding insane. My heart was doing something entirely unreasonable. It doesn't sound insane, I said. No. I've been trying to figure out how to stop thinking about you since you walked through the door covered in snow, so. I laughed, a little disbelieving at myself. I think we're both insane. He smiled, that same crooked smile from the doorway, except now it wasn't careful at all, now it was open, unguarded. The smile of a man who'd stopped pretending he wasn't hoping for something. Nora, he said, I really want to kiss you right now, and I'm aware that is an enormous complication given whose brother I am. Enormous, I agreed, my voice barely above a whisper. Say the word and I'll go back inside and pretend this whole conversation didn't happen. I didn't say the word. I stepped closer instead, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off him despite the cold, close enough that when he lifted a hand to brush a snowflake from my cheek, his fingers lingered there. Gentle, questioning. Theo, yeah, I really don't want you to go back inside. He kissed me then, slow and certain, snow falling around us like the whole world had gone quiet just to let this happen. It was the kind of kiss that rewrites things, every assumption I'd had about the night, about him, about what I thought I wanted from this Christmas Eve. When we finally pulled apart, both of us a little breathless, he rested his forehead against mine and let out a shaky laugh. That's going to complicate Thanksgiving, he said. We haven't even survived Christmas yet. Fair point. We stayed out there longer than we should have, wrapped in one blanket, trading soft laughs and softer confessions. Until the cold finally won and we slipped back inside, faces flushed, trying badly to look like nothing had happened. We did not succeed. Priya cornered me in the kitchen 20 minutes later while I was pretending to help with dishes I didn't need to help with. Okay, she said, arms crossed, eyes narrowed in the specific way of someone who has known you long enough to read every tale you own. What happened on that porch? Nothing happened on the porch. Nora, Priya, you have snow in your hair and you're smiling like an idiot, and my brother just walked past me looking like he won the lottery. Something happened on the porch. I set down the plate I'd been drying and turned to face her, bracing myself. I like him, I admitted. I know that's your one rule. I know it's complicated. I didn't plan for it, I swear, it just happened. I watched Priya's face cycle through about 6 emotions in the span of 2 seconds, surprise, something that looked briefly like alarm, and then, unexpectedly, a kind of soft resignation that melted into something close to relief. Okay, first, she said, that rule was mostly a joke, born from the fact that my last 2 friends who dated Theo turned it into a disaster and I had to pick sides. Second, she paused, studying me carefully. I've genuinely never seen him look at anyone the way he was looking at you tonight. Not once. Not in 3 years, so you're not mad. I'm terrified, she said honestly, because if this goes badly, I lose either my best friend or my brother at Christmas dinners for the rest of my life. And that sounds like a nightmare. But no, I'm not mad. She hesitated, then added quieter, he's had a rough couple of years, Nora. Residency's brutal, and after his last relationship ended, he kind of closed off. I haven't seen him this lit up in a long time, so if you're serious about this, actually serious, not a one-night Christmas thing, then okay. I'm not mad. That's when the twist came, the part of the night I genuinely hadn't seen building beneath the surface of everything else. Theo found us a few minutes later, an odd, careful look on his face like he was working up to something. Hey, can I steal Nora for a second? There's something I should probably say out loud before this goes any further. Priya raised an eyebrow at me, mouthing good luck, and slipped back toward the living room. Theo led me to the quiet of the hallway, hands in his pockets, suddenly looking less like the confident man from the porch and more like someone bracing for impact. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you react. My stomach dropped a little. Okay, 6 months ago I was engaged, he said. Her name was Claire. We called it off in the spring, mutually mostly, though it still wrecked me for a while. I haven't told my parents the full story because it's complicated and honestly a little embarrassing, and Priya only knows the surface of it. He took a breath. The reason I'm telling you this now, tonight, on my sister's porch of all places, is that I promised myself after Claire that I wasn't going to let myself feel anything for anyone until I actually knew what I wanted. And then you opened the door tonight with hot chocolate on your sweater and made a joke about my sister's ant-stuffing opinions, and every promise I made to myself just evaporated. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That's not the scary confession I thought this was going to be. No, I thought you were about to tell me you were still engaged or moving across the country tomorrow. Or something equally horrifying. I managed a shaky laugh. An ex-fiancé is a lot, but it's not. It doesn't scare me off if that's what you're worried about. It's not just that, he said, and here his voice dropped, more vulnerable than before. I matched to a hospital for my attending position in 6 weeks. I don't know yet if it's going to be here, near Priya and my parents, or 3 states away. I didn't want to start something with you and then vanish on you in February. That felt worse than not starting anything at all. And there it was, the twist the whole night had been quietly building toward, not a betrayal or a secret lover, but something far more human. Uncertainty, timing, the terrifying math of falling for someone you might not get to keep. I thought about it for a long moment, the hallway quiet around us, string lights blinking faintly from the living room beyond. Can I tell you what I think? I said finally. Please, I think if we spend the next 6 weeks not letting ourselves feel this because it might get complicated later, we'll have wasted 6 weeks we can't get back either way. I think geography is a real problem, but it's a problem for future us to solve, not tonight us. And I think, I added, stepping closer, echoing his words from the porch, I really don't want to go back to pretending I don't want this. Just because it might be hard later. Something in his face broke open with relief. You're serious, completely, even with the match hanging over everything, even then. I'd rather have 6 weeks of this being real than a lifetime of wondering what would have happened if I'd been too scared to try. He kissed me again. Right there in the hallway with the Christmas lights blinking gold against the walls, and this one felt different from the porch, less like a question, more like an answer. We didn't solve everything that night. The match results were still 6 weeks away, hanging over us like a countdown neither of us could control. And I won't pretend that uncertainty didn't sit heavy in my chest more than once over the following weeks. But we tried anyway, late-night calls after his shifts ended, him falling asleep mid-sentence more than once while I laughed quietly on the other end of the line. Weekend visits when his schedule allowed, Priya, delighted and increasingly smug, inserting herself into group chats she had no business being part of. 6 weeks later, on a gray Tuesday in February, Theo called me sounding like he could barely breathe. I matched, he said. Nora, I matched here, 2 hours from you. I'm staying. I don't fully remember what I said back, something incoherent and joyful, I think, half laughing, half crying in my kitchen, but I remember exactly how it felt, like every uncertain, terrifying, hopeful piece of that Christmas Eve had finally clicked into place. We got married 2 years later, in December, obviously, with actual working Christmas lights strung through the reception hall, because Theo insisted, half joking, that we owed those broken ones from his parents' living room some kind of tribute. Priya stood up as my maid of honor and gave a toast that started with, I once told these two people not to fall for each other, and ended with both of us in tears. His parents still tell the story of the night he walked in soaked from the snow and somehow walked out, hours later, a different man. I like to think I know exactly which moment did it, somewhere between the tangled lights and the porch railing, snow falling steady around two people who hadn't planned on finding each other, but found each other anyway. Every Christmas Eve since, we sit on that same porch for a few minutes, just the two of us, blanket and all, and remember exactly how close we came to almost missing it. Thank you so much for listening to this one. If you felt even a little bit of what I felt writing it, that means everything to me. If you enjoyed this story, please consider following or subscribing. There are a lot more like this one on the way, and I'd love for you to be here for them. And I have to ask, has anything like this ever happened to you? Have you ever fallen for someone you absolutely weren't supposed to, at exactly the wrong moment, in exactly the right place? Or maybe you've watched it happen to someone close to you. I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes the best ones are the ones nobody plans for.